So, hello and welcome to the first meta report of the patch 10.23. In this video, I'm just gonna talk a little bit about the comps that I'm currently seeing in ranked play, how they're performing, and how you should build them. And yeah, more or less, they're gonna be ranked power. So the first comps that I'm gonna be talking about is usually the comp that is performing the best. So let's get started right away. So currently we have Dusk in the #1 spot. So the thing about Dusk is like the following, right? If like one guy would have Dusk uncontested, he'd pretty much be getting top 4 every single game. But because Dusk being so popular, you kind of have like Dusk players griefing each other, which sometimes can cause this comp to not perform as well. Or yeah, these are usually the type of things you have to pay attention for. The cool thing about Dusk is that it's surprisingly flexible. Like if you want, you can set yourself up with Vayne 3-star as the carry. Usually with Vayne, you're gonna have some sort of Ginzo QSS Hurricane type carry build. I would recommend doing this with Vayne Sharpshooter. I wouldn't recommend doing this with Vayne Dusk Chosen. You can if you want to, it's just a personal preference from me. But yeah, overall, this comp is definitely super flexible. For example, if you take a look at the Jhin items, like you don't even need any of these Jhin items. Like Jhin is perfectly fine with Infinity Edge, Last Whisper, QSS, Giant Slayer. Well, yeah, it's Giant Slayer, but yeah, it's like overall the amount of items you can give Jhin are amazing. He doesn't even need the Dusk Bed if you have one. Like a lot of people prefer putting the Dusk Bed on someone like Kayn, who's also performing super well with it. So yeah. Usually the main carry will be Jhin together with a Riven. Riven items are somewhat important. I definitely think you cannot skip on the Bramble Vest. Bramble Vest is an absolute core. But the rest of the Riven items are a little bit more flexible. I've seen Riven who carry a Locket, a Rabadon is popular, even a Jeweled Gauntlet you can sometimes see on her. It's like, you don't have to be stuck on the Bluid or the Ionic, it's just that those two tend to perform really well. Also keep in mind, if you end up having a blue Riven, feel free to position in the backline. She will immediately jump towards the front line. Other than that, like for Cassio, usually you give her like items like a Chalice. That seems to be this is really good, especially if you have like a Dusk Cassio chosen, because she can like ult at the very start of the fight. You kind of want one ZZ Rod, usually on Thresh, and then like put him at the backliner. You can also position yourself like this, so the Zilean gets protected from the ZZ Rod. Don't really care too much about these two. And yeah, that's more or less the comp. Like it can also be a 4 Dusk 4 Sharpshooter comp. You don't have to run 6 Dusks, though it's definitely something you should be aiming for. I would also recommend, for example, putting something like the Asir soldiers into the front line, because you really have to pay attention with the Zilean ult. The Zilean goes for the people who have the lowest HP. So if you end up having like a soldier who's completely safe in the corner, nobody goes for him, you might lose a fairly important Zilean ult, so just as something to keep in mind. So that's Dusk, definitely one of the best performing comps currently. I think it's partly it has to do with you're just so very flexible in the level 7 roll down for your chosen. It's like, you know, Aatrox Vanguard chosen is perfectly fine, or in general Aatrox chosen, Riven chosen, Cassio chosen, Jhin chosen. It's like simply the fact that for stage 4 you can run any of these as a chosen just makes you super flexible and lets you transition smooth towards level 8 and the late game. To win with this comp, you might either have to, you might need a Zilean 2-star, very strong Jhin items and Riven items. I don't think a Riven 3-star or a Jhin 3-star is necessary to win with this comp, but it definitely helps. But being level 9 and adding another legendary like Yon can definitely help to close out the game. So for the next comp, let's talk about the Enlightened. So initially, I think everyone thought, well, you know, it's like the Talon, the animation changes, was this a nerf? And I would say right now the verdict seems to be it is a buff. Like the Talon targeting change, going for the person with the lowest armor, ended up making him carry harder. And the longer animation isn't that big of a deal because it allows him to have a higher chance of dodging spells. So this comp right now is definitely still performing extremely well. You will see it a lot. Regarding Talon items, I would say overall, IE, you need it. Infinity Edge, you can't get around that. For the other items, I mean, GA is very helpful, but technically optional. And instead of Hand of Justice, sometimes you see Last Whisper because people like to be flexible in terms of the items. Giant Slayer is also a very, very great item for Talon here. And yeah, this is usually, and sometimes BT, but it's more rare to see BT on Talon these days. I like Ludens on Morgana because it procs on the Dazzle, but there's also the option of just giving her Chalice instead of the Ludens. And if you have Chalice, you can use this as well to enhance the Talon ultimate. Just something to keep in mind. Regarding the rest of the comp, it's just pretty much a very basic setup. If you have, depending on the Chosen rank, right now I don't have a Chosen in here. If you end up having an Enlightened Chosen, you can like change up the comp. Enlightened Chosen usually means that Janna ends up getting replaced for Zillion. If you have the Assassin Chosen, that means the Pike can leave for potentially another Legendary. And yeah, that's, or if you preferably have an Adept Chosen, that gives you the 4 Adept buff, which is also absolutely amazing. So the nice thing about this comp is just, again, you're very, very flexible. I would say the Chosen you kind of want the least is like the Morgana Dazzle Chosen. It's not bad, and for Dazzle isn't really a bad trait either, but it's definitely something you kind of want to see the least. I feel Talon Chosen is pretty important in this comp. It's just that the Talon Chosen ends up... the Talon Chosen has like bonus stats. He has like 200 HP more, but much more importantly, he has 30 AD more. 30 AD means higher crit, a higher scaling on his ultimate, and he's going to much more likely do the one shot and just pick apart the entire enemy team. So definitely heavily preferred on the Talon Chosen. Sometimes something you can do is you can be like very flexible with the items, you know, GA Infinity Edge that could go in a Jhin, that could go in an Ashe, and you only commit on this comp if you find yourself a Talon Chosen, so you really have the super strong power spike. Definitely this comp is still performing very, very strongly, and I can heavily recommend it. So the next one, so that's the Diana build. So this is pretty much tied to a Moonlight Chosen, so you need Moonlight Diana or Moonlight Lissandra, or you can't play this comp. Don't get baited into trying to play this comp with Diana Assassin Chosen. It will fail in 90% of the cases, so don't even bother. Regarding this comp, most people agree that 6 Assassins seems to be an overkill, so it's not something you really need to aim for. For the items, I would say Titans and Gunblade are super popular, but honestly, Diana is extremely flexible in items, just to make some suggestions. A Bramble Vest is extremely popular on her. Claw not so much, because there isn't that much magic damage right now. You also have, for example, like Hand of Justice is great, Infinity Edge she has. So Hand of Justice is great, QSS is amazing, lots of people like QSS on Diana. And overall, yeah, you can build her as a tank. I'd be careful with the second Titan. It seems to be bugging out a little bit with her ultimate and the Titan stacks, so would not recommend giving her a second Titan's Resolve. And regarding the other items, I mean, it's mainly flexible. If you find items for Talon, you can itemize him. Lissandra likes taking a ZZ Rod and then protecting this backline. And yeah, that seems to be more or less it. It's very, very tied to the Moonlight Chosen, and yeah. You're gonna have to slow roll for the Diana and Lissandra 3-star. The cool thing about this comp is it's pretty much a very, very safe top 4. It's also a lot top 2. It might struggle winning the game, but it's just the moment you see a Moonlight Diana, Moonlight Lissandra, you can commit on this if you have the right items. If you don't have the worst RNG, it's pretty much a safe top 4, which is why this comp is ranking so high. It's just like, the main part about this comp is that if you have, like, let's say you have a Diana Chosen, you find a Lissandra 2-star, like, having a Diana 3-star with Titan's Resolve and or Gunblade, it's just people can't deal with this in stage 2 and stage 3. It's like the Diana will literally, like, she will just remove everything. You will always win streak, which means you will remain very high HP, very high economy. Diana 3-star in the early game is just too much to handle for most comps, even if they're trying to play the strongest board, and that allows you just have a very smooth sailing towards the top 4. So let's go towards the next comp. So this is the Adept Hunters. So As far as we can tell, I don't think this comp is terrible, but it does seem to be a comp that is right now falling off. You can definitely see that the amount of Hunter players is heavily decreasing, and people aren't really valuing Ashe that much anymore. It is a considerable nerf, like the Hunter nerf. It applies to all of the Hunters. The Ashe nerfs, making her more squishy and more likely to be targeted by Talon, unless she has a GA. So it's like overall her item build has become less flexible. Like a QSS instead of a GA on Ashe right now seems to be much worse due to Talon. And yeah, overall this comp definitely is struggling a bit. It doesn't mean it's terrible. It's still like if you hit your stuff, it can still be an easy top 4. But you might be struggling a little bit more than before in being able to win the game with it. But there is a new alternative I wanted to mention, which is that right now people are really starting to figure out about Aphelios. Aphelios got some mana changes, and honestly, I feel Aphelios is like, this is still, it's a bit of a how can I say this? This is kind of an up and coming comp. It's still, everything is still very new, and like the comp might still change a lot, but I tested this a little bit myself and I thought it was absolutely amazing. Aphelios seems to be performing super strong, even without being a chosen. But currently I would recommend that you tie this comp to either a Moonlight chosen Sylas, a Moonlight chosen Aphelios, that's your preferred one, or a 100 chosen Aphelios and just 3-star him and don't care about the Moonlight. It does look like 3-star Aphelios is currently strong enough for a very easy top 4. And also with the amount of like decreased Hunter players, hitting your stuff like Warwick and Ashe and Kindred feels very easy, and also has a great item distribution. It's like, currently I would say the core on Aphelios seems to be QSS and Shojin. The third item I'm still trying out a little bit. It can be something like, BT, can also be something like Deathblade, potentially Giant Slayer, potentially End of Justice, Infinity Edge, Last Whisper. I'm gonna have to test a little bit about what his third item should be. But, and this is important, don't build the Ginzo on him. Ginzo on Aphelios I would not recommend anymore. Instead, what I would do is I would use the rods to build Rabadons and Jeweled Gauntlet on the Kindred, and I would use the recurve bows for ZZ rods on, for example, something like the Nunu or the Sylas, and protect your Aphelios from the enemy Talons. One build that is especially recommended right now is combining the ZZ Rod with a Bramble in the backline. This causes, if the Talon doesn't have QSS, the Talon will go on the Nunu, but he can't really properly kill him. And as a consequence, it's like that Talon is going to be stuck on the Nunu for the entire fight, which is pretty much less free reign for the Aphelios. You're not going to need a GA here. So yeah, that's a big fat recommendation. I would say the Aphelios comp is currently the dark horse of this patch. I think this comp might definitely pick up some pace in the next week. And yeah, gonna be curious if I'm not sure if I'm gonna hold the same high opinion about this comp in 1 week, but right now this is definitely my dark horse and heavy recommendation. But just remember, it will perform much better if you're gonna have a Moonlight chosen Aphelios or a Moonlight chosen Sylas and Slowroll for the 3 stars at level 6. Okay, what do we have here? Next up is Divine. So Divine got a few changes. So Warwick overall got some nerfs, but the entire Divine trait ended up getting buffed. Where does this put him? Well, right now the build that seems to be the most preferred is the QSS Hurricane Deathblade, though I find that a second Hurricane or a Hand of Justice instead of the Deathblade also works perfectly fine. I think this comp, if everything, if you get everything together, if you get the Warwick 2-star, it doesn't have to be a Warwick chosen, but if you get like a Warwick 2-star, if you have the 6 Divine trait, this comp it's not that difficult to get top 4 with this comp. It usually has a decent matchup into the Talon, and it definitely has the potential of winning you the game with Yoan 2-star and Lissandra 2-star. The issue with this comp more lies in it not being very flexible. So the problem is like that you really need those Warwick items, right? You really need the QSS and the Hurricane for Warwick to properly do his job. But the issue is that it's very difficult to, due to the Hurricane, to pivot away into something different if you end up not hitting your Warwick. So if you're committing on this comp and you hit all your stuff, you're perfectly fine. But if you don't hit your stuff, then, you know, it's like you can't just pivot between Ashe, Jhin, and Talon. You're pretty much stuck here and have to hope everything works out. I would still recommend this comp due to the decrease in Hunters, but if Aphelios comps end up picking up the pace and more people are going towards the Hunters again, then this comp might be worse again because those Hunter players will pull out all of those Warwicks, like, out of the pool, making your life miserable. So yeah, it's still a recommendation for me, but pay attention what the lobby is doing and be prepared that this can be hit or miss. Next comp. Okay, so this is an interesting one. This is the so-called Lissandra carry. Again, this is tied to Moonlight, so preferably you would have a Moonlight Lissandra, but a Moonlight Diana is fine too. Now, the main question people, when they see this comp, is like, why don't you just play Diana, right? Like, that's the question everybody is asking. And you know what? It's a fair question. You could just play Diana, but maybe sometimes the items aren't just there. Maybe you're just high rolling the Lissandra and the Lissandra items. Especially, for example, having a super early blue buff with the Lissandra 3-star can be extremely strong. I think this comp is amazing. I've played Lissandra carry a few times, and if I have a blue double jeweled gauntlet Lissandra, on average she deals between 10 and 15,000 damage every single fight. I think that is absolutely amazing. I love Lissandra. I think she's this comp is a very, very easy top 4 as well. I think it's amazing. There's some people who are like, no, don't do Jeweled Gauntlet, do like Rabadon Jeweled Gauntlet. But then you just put yourself into the position, if your ult doesn't crit, you might be lacking the damage. So I tried IE Jeweled Gauntlet, and even that I thought was kind of wonky. So from my experience playing this comp so far, I would say go for the blue and the double Jeweled Gauntlet. At least for me, it is the build that worked out the best. You can also set yourself up with Diana items. I should make a note regarding those Moonlight comps. Moonlight currently is still bugged, and what that means is that there's a bug regarding the tiebreaker. So if both of these units have 3 items, that would cause a tiebreaker. Well, currently in the game, I think it's supposed to be random on who gets the 4-star, but it's not random. It is always in the following order. Diana, Lissandra, Sylas, Aphelios. That's like the tiebreaker order. Which means that if you would give Diana 3 items in this comp, then this would cause Diana to become 4-star and your comp would be ruined. So here is pretty much the rule, a max of 2 items on Diana. On the other side, if you're playing the Diana comp, you can use this bug to your advantage because it doesn't matter how many items Lissandra has. As long as Diana has 3 items, she will always be prioritized. She will always be 4-star. So if you want, you can give her 3 ZZ rods, as an example. If you want, you could give the Lissandra 3 ZZ rods, and you wouldn't have to worry about Diana not becoming a 4-star, because she will always be prioritized in this scenario. So this is just something for you guys to keep in mind. But yeah, other than that, for this comp, it's definitely a recommendation for me. Unfortunately, again, it's tied to a Moonlight Chosen, so if you get it, that's great. If you don't, you can pretty much ignore it. Let's and here we have another comp. Okay, so talking about comps that are tied to an early game Chosen, the double bubble comp. I mean, that comp has so many names. I think Vietnami is one of the names that are kind of stuck around. Let's just call it double bubble for now. The idea behind this comp is just if you get a chosen Enlightened army or a chosen Mage Nami, you try to slow roll, you try to 3-star her, you abuse Nami being super good with the Ludens, and the reason you kind of need the Nami to be chosen is because she's because she gets mana reduction if she's chosen, and it's super important for her to get more ults out, meaning more Luden procs. Nami 3-star with these items probably averages between, I don't know, 7 to 10k, so 7 to 10,000 damage every fight. She can self-peel extremely well, if assassins are jumping towards her. Nami's ults prioritizes the people closest to her, the enemies closest to her. So if a Talon is on her, she will prioritize him. So it's usually, she has very, very strong self-peel. If you end up having an Enlightened Chosen, that usually means you're going to have to run 2 mages. So that's usually Annie and Lulu, and then Annie gets replaced by Lilia. Otherwise, if you have a Mage Chosen, you would most likely be running Lulu, because she provides extra utility, and then you can keep the Lulu. But there's two groups of people. There's people who like Lulu 2 is better, and there's people who like Lilia 1-star is better. I'm part of the group that says Lilia 1-star is better because Lilia 1-star has amazing base stats. She's even more tanky than a Lulu 2-star. I think she provides better CC. I think she synergizes better with the Nami. So my money is on Lilia. But if you prefer the Lulu, then that's perfectly fine. So the Talon here is a little bit of an optional one. That kind of depends on your items, because this could be a Janna, for example. This could be a Janna, and it could be Mystic. Whether or not you run the Talon or the Janna, it depends on how good you hit the Talon, and it also depends on do you have items for Talon. So, but overall, if you can play Talon, I'd probably recommend it. Mystic is nice, but it's not super necessary in this type of comp. So this is also just something for you to keep in mind. It's a great comp. You should probably play this comp if you have the setup for an early Ludens and you found yourself the early Nami chosen. Otherwise, again, you can probably ignore this. But if you have everything, if everything falls together, very, very easy top 4 and usually very decent top 2. So let's talk a little bit about comps that are a bit more on the edge. So I'm not a fan of Warlords. I'll just be honest. I don't like Warlords. I think they're super risky. Like, yes, if everything in the Warlords comes together, you can make the top 4, right? Maybe you'll win the game. But the thing about Warlords is I think they're very, very tied to specific items. I think you're super tied to Katarina 3-star. I think it's extremely difficult regarding the tier 4 chosen meta to play them right now, because you're usually trying to hit that Katarina 3-star to carry you towards the late game. I don't hate them. I think they're fine. I just think they're somewhat risky. So it's not a comp I would recommend, but it's definitely a comp I wanted to introduce. I would say your late game goal overall would be the 9 Warlords, preferably like a Warlord Yon is amazing. If you end up not having the Warlord spats, you usually would be running a 6 Warlord strategy with something in the department of maybe Jhin Aatrox Pike, or maybe like just Aatrox together with like a Yon, you know, like putting in some legendaries. It kind of depends on how the game went for you. Regarding Katarina itemization, like you will always, every single game, have to build QSS Gunblade on her. There's no way around the QSS Gunblade if you want Katarina to be useful. The third item is flexible. So let me make some suggestions. So, okay, well, let's start with the Jeweled Gauntlet. So the Jeweled Gauntlet is kind of great on her because it kind of like increases the damage from Katarina 2-star, which really helps you in the mid game, because sometimes she like can be lacking a little bit of damage. So Jeweled Gauntlet is great, and much more importantly about the Jeweled Gauntlet is you don't have to run Pike. Even though Pike is a great unit, Warlords sometimes doesn't want to run Pike, especially if you're going towards 9 Warlords. So Jeweled Gauntlet is a big recommendation on my side, but to suggest 2 alternatives, you have like the Hand of Justice. So Hand of Justice is a pretty good item. It's like 1 auto attack less for the first ult, potentially 2, depending if she takes damage. Hand of Justice just has a great synergy with the Gunblade because you get the heal proc, she heals up faster. If you get the damage proc, she deals more damage and heals up faster. So obviously you're after the damage proc, but Hand of Justice is just overall a pretty great item. The third item, which is an item that used to be good on her, then it wasn't, and now it's good on her again, which is the ZZ Rod. So why is that? So the way ZZ Rod worked was, initially, if you put it on assassins and you put them in the backline, it taunted everyone, and that made them focus you. And if you take damage, you gain mana, which made her ult really fast and had the people surrounding her, which usually resulted in extremely amazing Katarina ults. Then they changed the ZZ Rod taunt duration, and as a consequence, they also ended up, the item ended up not working properly on assassins anymore. So it's like if you put it on a Katarina, she jumps, nobody gets taunted, item is worthless. But now on 10.23, as far as I can tell, this has changed again, which means that right now ZZ Rod on Katarina is a super, super strong item. You should consider ZZ Rod as a mana item, because the way it would work is that, you know, everybody focus her, everybody damages her, she gets a huge amount of mana from the damage, and then she just heals back up again, which works great with the Gunblade build. So this is also a recommendation on my side. And yeah, that's pretty much for Warlords. Let's talk about the last comp. We have the Duelists. Okay, so this is a very, very experimental, because I currently would not recommend this comp. It's a little bit of a mix. It's like the old Duelist comp with the Yasuo build, the Infinity Edge Titans and QSS. You're pretty much required to find a Yasuo chosen to play it. I've been trying around with Duelist without the Yasuo chosen, but I had very mixed results. I didn't really enjoy it that much or had a lot of success with it. But the cool part about the Duelist is now that with Xin Zhao, they have an additional win condition, which is really nice. In terms of items for Xin, I think BT is great for him. Bramble is also a very, very strong item. QSS, Hand of Justice, Deathblade. He is surprisingly flexible in terms of his items, so you guys can just try out some stuff and see what works, but he can pretty much use most of these items. There's also something that's currently on the rise, which is a Hurricane build on Yasuo. So as you know, Hurricane got buffed in the previous patch, resulting in more damage for every auto attack. Yasuo obviously has like very strong auto attacks, and being able to like simultaneously kill a backliner while he's hacking away at the front line can be very valuable. So if you're looking into something a little bit more experimental, you can also try around with the Hand of Justice Yasuo item build. So yeah. So that is it for now. So just as a quick summary, we have ourselves some Dusk, some Enlightened Flex, a Diana carry, some Hunters, and a new Hunter variation that revolves around Aphelios. We still have the Divine comp, a Lissandra carry, the Nami comp, the Double Bubble, the Warlords, and the Duelist comps. Are there more comps out there? Yes, there are more comps out there. Just as an example, there's still like Ninja Assassins, but right now I feel even though they got buffed, I don't really see them performing very well. It's a meta problem. It's like I can see Ninja Assassins being super good in the next patch when we get these system changes, but right now I am not a big fan of the Ninja Assassins. Yes, you can make them work, but they're definitely not on my recommended list. Occasionally you see people going for the 9 Cultists, and honestly it's working fine. It's not a great comp, it's a decent comp, so you can definitely play it and probably get your occasional top 4. Do we have anything else? Oh yeah. And there's also one more comp that is kind of upcoming, which is a Keeper comp. It's more or less 6 Keeper for Dusk, revolving, around the Riven and the Cannon. It's probably a comp I'll mention next week, but right now I haven't really seen too much of it, so I'm gonna try researching the Keeper comps a little bit more before I'll present them in this video. Okay, so that was it from me. If you guys have any questions or if you have suggestions for comps or something I was missing, feel free to share with me in the comments, and I might include it in next week's video. You guys have a nice day and good luck getting LP.